Anthropic has released a document that is flipping the AI agency narrative on its head. It's called the Founder's Playbook, and it's basically just their guide for how to build an AI native startup using Claude code, all the way from the ideation to the actual scaling of the business. Anthropic is basically positioning this document as a guide for people wanting to build AI native products, and they walk through how Claude code can be incorporated into the whole startup lifecycle, from finding product market fit to actually scaling the business for long-term success. Now, I'm not a startup founder, but I do run an AI agency, and if you look through this document, you'll realize that it's not just a good guide for people looking to build a startup using Claude code, but it's also helpful for agency owners looking to position their agency for long-term success. Right, a lot of the principles overlap between founding a startup and building an actual product and founding an agency and selling the service. Inside of this document are two specific things that I've identified that every AI agency owner should hear right now. One of them is going to make you a better AI agency owner, and the other is more of an uncomfortable warning about where AI agencies are heading in the future. So in this video, I'm basically going to be breaking down exactly what you can take away as an AI agency owner from the Founder's Playbook and how you can apply it to your agency to set up for long-term success based on what Anthropic recommends for startups. All right, let's get right into it. All right, so here's the Founder's Playbook. If you don't already know how to find this, I'll just link it in the description of the video down below. But this is basically Anthropic's document for how to build an AI native startup using Claude code. And as I mentioned, there's two separate things in this document that I really want to touch on, right? One uncomfortable truth and one way for you to actually improve your AI agency using what they've laid out in this playbook. So let's start with the uncomfortable part, just so we can get out of the way, right? The first thing to note here is that this whole playbook is basically hinged on the idea that pretty much any non-technical person in the near future is going to be able to create technical product with a very low barrier to entry, meaning that tools like Claude Code and Codex and Gemini are only going to become increasingly more commoditized and accessible to your average daily user. All right, this is pretty well summed up in chapter 2 over here. What it means to be a founder is changing, right? The traditional startup model assumed you needed to hire an engineer to build, salespeople to sell, and ops people to run the business. But essentially, as AI agents become more commoditized, they are going to be able to handle a lot of those functions and many more better than a human can, and with a lot less friction. And there's a lot of subtext to be analyzed here, right? Anthropic is basically hinting to us that the traditional agency model of just doing implementations is going to become obsolete in the future, right? People that just hinge their entire agency on just implementing AI into businesses are going to be set up for failure because it is getting so easy for us to actually build out software using Claude Code and other AI agents, right? Anthropic even says over here, right? Timing and orchestration are everything. This line here is probably the most important. The founder orchestrating these AI tools needs to know how and when to apply them. The aspect of human taste and human judgment is going to become increasingly more valuable in the future as the technological aspect of things becomes increasingly more accessible. And so as an AI agency, what you need to be doing is moving away from just focusing your agency on providing AI tool capabilities, right? Just the product itself, and focusing more on the timing and orchestration aspect of things, right? Transitioning away from just an AI agency to becoming more of a consultancy. Businesses in the future are going to value your expert judgment on how they should actually incorporate AI into their business far more than your ability to actually implement it. And so what I'll tell you, if that you're an agency owner right now breaking into the space, or if you already currently run an agency, you need to start pivoting away from just doing implementations and more towards doing retainers. Get your clients on retainer, build a long-term relationship with them, present your agency as a technical expert which knows how to use these tools and how exactly to apply them to specific business use cases, and sell that as your product, right? The service and consulting and technical expertise rather than the implementation itself. So that is the warning that Anthropic is giving us that you can kind of analyze from this playbook over here. You can also read a little bit more into this. They kind of walk through exactly how you can use different AI tools for specific use cases, right? Agentic coding, workflow automation, and conversational intelligence and research. But overall, that's the biggest takeaway for AI agencies. Now, the Founder's Playbook also walks through 4 different stages of building out a startup, including the idea stage, the MVP stage, the launch stage, and the scale stage. So we're gonna be walking through all these and how you can apply the takeaways from each one of these stages to bettering your AI agency and setting it up for long-term success. Now, the first stage here is the ideation stage, right? And the general premise that Anthropic is really trying to push here for founders building a startup is that the ideation stage is all about validation, right? You need to prove that a problem exists before you offer a solution or before you build anything. Now that building out technical product is so simple, it's so easy to do this mental masturbation exercise where you spin up a prototype and treat the fact that you've created it as an accomplishment and proof that the market wants it. One thing that the playbook really emphasizes here is that the prototype is more of a pressure testing prop used for conversations, right? The prototype's existence itself is not the evidence that the solution actually works. The evidence comes from actual customer conversations and talking with your actual market to find out what exactly they're looking for and how your prototype or solution can help solve that. And so right here, Anthropic really lays it out for us. The founder's main goal, or the AI agency owner's main goal, is research-oriented validation, right? You need to understand exactly what the market wants before you can provide a solution for it. And that's why I emphasize so clearly in my messaging to you guys that before you get any clients, before you jump into this business model, if you're a beginner and you're thinking about getting into the AI agency space and building out AI solutions for clients, before you learn any of that, you need to get clients first. And it may sound counterintuitive to you because you may think, how can I get clients if I don't know how to build out stuff for them or if I don't know how to consult them in the right way? You're only going to get that experience and you're only going to get that market research if you actually go into these businesses and learn exactly what their pain points are, what their bottlenecks are, and how you yourself can position your consultancy and agency to help them solve those problems. You can't develop the solution first if you don't exactly know what your clients actually want, right? I see so many people studying the best way to use Claude Code, learning all the new features, becoming a Claude Code expert, all without any clients and no one to deliver for, right? If you're not delivering for any clients, you're not making any money. So make money first, get the clients to pay you, and then focus on learning their bottlenecks and iterate from there, right? It has never been easier to build out technical product. And so take advantage of that, leverage that relentlessly. And that's the main takeaway of the ideation stage over here. Now, Anthropic also lists out here some ideas for how you can use Claude in the ideation stage. So they say that you can use Claude Chat for any questions or brainstorming, Cowork for research analysis, Claude Code for writing testing. To be honest, this is all just a lot of fluff. And this is Anthropic's own version of mental masturbation, right? You don't need to map out all of your agency processes to a particular tool like this. Just use Claude Code for everything, and then use Claude Code if you need to connect to some files on your desktop or something like that, right? It's not that hard. It's a lot simpler than they're making it seem over here. And this is actually helpful, though. What they're putting out here is some ideas for how you can use Claude to actually ideate the process itself. And so market research and mapping the competitive landscape, right? That's a great use case for Claude Code. And it's something I emphasize a lot on my Instagram page and the reels that I create is how can you use Claude for competitor research, right? AI is one of the best things to happen to researchers, right? It is so easy to just type into Claude to research something online and for you to get a comprehensive summary of exactly what you need to know about that subject. You can also use a lot of other tools. I like to use Perplexity for deep research. I personally think it's better than Claude because it does more citations, it does more of a deep research, and it does a more comprehensive summary of the topic that you give to it. But Claude can also be good for this as well, right? You can perform market research and map the competitive landscape. Using Claude, you can also add on different actors. So if you want to use Apify to add on any different additional web scrapers to do more thorough research using different software platforms. So take advantage of Claude because it is one of the best ways for you to do research and to understand your market properly. Obviously secondary to actually working with real customers. And so yeah, that's the biggest takeaway that I personally found from the ideation stage. If you want to read a little bit more into this, they have some interesting insights, but in general, the ideation stage, keep it simple, stupid, right? You don't need to do as much thorough analysis of this as Anthropic might want you to do, right? It's pretty much as simple as just do market research, get clients, iterate from there. That's all you really need to do. All right, next stage that Anthropic emphasizes, stage 2, the MVP stage, right? What an MVP is basically the smallest version of your product that works. Whether it's an actual software product or an agency service, as you're developing that, you need to provide people an actual use that they're going to pay for. Now, there's a lot of stuff that they outline here in the MVP stage. I'm just going to go over the most important stuff that I've found that can directly apply to AI agencies. And the first one here is interesting, is the zero friction scope creep. Now, if you're in my school community, you've heard me talk about this extensively in the client delivery module, but the number one thing that you're going to run into as an AI consultancy or as an AI agency delivering custom solutions for businesses is the process of scope creep, right? Clients wanting more from you than they initially agreed upon and kind of creeping in on the scope of the project to try to get more and more out of you without necessarily paying more, okay? That's essentially what scope creep is, and it's very common in the agency and consultancy space. And the idea that Anthropic is bringing to attention here is that scope creep is becoming more and more dangerous as AI tools become increasingly more commoditized. And the reason behind that is that since it is so much easier now than ever to build out technical product with Claude Code, a lot of business owners think that they can tell the agencies and consultancies that they work with to just build out an additional product or build out an additional feature without actually paying them more, because in their mind, it's not that much of an additional ask, right? They think that it doesn't take too much time to build a technical product, so that the agency should just do it for free or for a low fee. That is the idea of zero friction scope creep. Essentially, businesses think that there is zero friction to building out these additional features, whereas in reality, you and I both know that with development, there's obviously an extensive testing phase. There's obviously a lot of debugging that has to go on. And even if there isn't, you don't want to necessarily be building out high value automations for businesses if you're not getting something in return, right? This all goes back to value-based pricing. You want to base your pricing based off of the value you're delivering to the business rather than the input that you put in. Because once you do that, you're able to separate your margins from the time that you put into the work that you do and really build a sustainable business from that, right? And zero friction scope creep prevents all of this. It is the cock blocker to scaling your business, right? If you keep getting scope creeped, you're not going to be able to grow because businesses are constantly going to be asking you to do extra things without giving you anything in return. So if you want to set up your agency for long-term success, then you need to find some way to prevent against this. And what Anthropic advocates inside of here, which is something that I talk about a lot in my school community, is the idea of building out a process map. Now, obviously you want to get them to sign a contract as well to agree to the exact things that you're going to be building out for them. But a process map can really help you set out more granularly the expectations between you and the business that you're working with. Now, what is a process map? It's basically a way that you can identify different points in a business's operations and label them very clearly so that you know exactly what's going on in each process of the operation. So take, for example, a triage automation, right? Where, for example, you have a voice agent that needs to triage a customer conversation to a support team. A very simple process map for that would be you have the AI agent. The AI agent directs traffic from the customer conversations into the ops team. And from there, the ops team makes a decision, and then they decide whether or not to route that conversation to another member of the team or whether or not to respond to it themselves, give the agent feedback, vice versa, right? So it's basically a way to map out specific sub-processes within a macro process so you can identify exactly which parts of the business are the bottlenecks and which parts of the business will be the highest leverage to automate, right? So very common in the consulting space and obviously in the AI consulting space. And this is what Anthropic advocates you to create, right? To defend against this scope creep, you need to identify exactly which parts of the process you are automating and what you're responsible for, and do not do any more than that, right? Do not let the business scope creep on you. And if they do, then present them the process map or the contract as a way to circle back to exactly what your original commitment was and potentially offer them upsells in the future if they do want to pursue additional optimizations or feature add-ons, right? Right here, Anthropic outlines it very clearly how Claude can help MVP stage founders define your architecture before you build. It is crucial that you define the architecture of the business and identify their processes that you're going to be automating before you start building. Because if you agree to a general build out, let's say you agree to automate their social media content, right? I can already think of 10 different scope creeps that could come with that. If you say you're going to automate their social media content, the business might think that it also includes analysis of the social media content, iterations on the social media content that you create, right? Comprehensive market research to inform the social media content, right? These are all things that you could very realistically do with Claude Code with little to no friction if you know how to implement them, but they're not part of the initial agreement if you don't outline them inside of the process map. So you need to define the exact architecture of what you're building, what's included in your automation before you actually agree to any sort of build out or any sort of payment plan, right? So that's essentially what they're outlining here, translated for AI agency operators. And then obviously iterate through the plan and the process map as you work through the project. If the client wants an additional thing that's not included in the process map, include that in your retainer or include it as an additional feature add-on that they could purchase. But never just do stuff for free, right? That is absolutely not the way that you want to go about doing things. Another thing that Anthropic points to here, which I think is a great idea if you're running an AI agency and you're looking to scale it long-term in the future, is this idea of leveraging your Claude.md files, right? If you don't know what a Claude.md is, it's basically a markdown document which acts as persistent instructions and serves as a memory base for your AI agents, right? So it's basically an artifact which keeps track of how you've built out a project and any rules and stipulations you've added along the way that are native to that project's build out. The way you can use this is when you're building out a solution for a client, let's say you're building out a content engine, go back to that example again, you don't necessarily have to build out an entirely new content engine every time you work with a new client, right? Once you build it out once, you can take that framework that you've used to build out the specific content engine for that business, extract the repeatable parts of it from the Claude.md file, and then implement that into other clients who ask you for the same exact automation. This is how we can productize the service aspect of our agency, right? All of the implementations that we do, all of the specific requirements that we find along the way, all of the different knacks and tacks that there are to building out an automation for this particular client can be transferred over to the other clients that we work with and in the automations that we build out for them. And so all of that is stored in your Claude.md if you're building out your Claude.md properly. And if you're still confused about what a Claude.md is, or you don't exactly know the best way to build one out, then I basically walk through exactly what it is and how to build it out in my school community down below. It's a great resource that you can use to keep track of a project's memory and to transfer best practices between projects. But overall, great resource over here. Highly recommend you take this advice from Anthropic. But yeah, those were the most salient features I found from the MVP stage. Now moving on, the next stage is launch. And one of the biggest things that Anthropic emphasizes here is that as an early stage founder, being in every single part of the process has both its upsides and its downsides, right? If you're a solo founder, then obviously you're involved in every single process of running your agency. You're involved in the sales process, you're involved in the development process, you're involved in marketing, pricing, technical delivery, all of that stuff. And in the beginning, that can be an asset because when you do hire people, you'll understand exactly how each process can best be done, and you can instruct people on how to perform those responsibilities in the best way possible. Now, the problem there, as stated in the Founder's Playbook, is that if you're involved in every single process of the business, then you yourself become the bottleneck. At first, it can be an asset, but as volume grows and operational complexity multiplies, that same instinct of wanting to be involved in every single one of the processes becomes a constraint to the business, right? If you're running an AI agency, I want you to be very honest with yourself. When was the last time you let a decision or a client request pile up to the point where you addressed it a week after it was brought to your attention or a month after it was brought to your attention, right? I know a lot of you guys are guilty with procrastination. I am myself as well. And as little pieces of procrastination pile up, you become more and more of a bottleneck to the business itself. And if that's you, I hate to break it to you, but you're not really an agency at that point, right? You're more of a self-employed freelancer with extra steps. So how does Anthropic recommend that you approach this? Number one thing that they say here that I think is the highest signal for agency owners is that you need to build systems that replace founder attention. As we mentioned earlier, it's becoming increasingly easier for you to build out technical product using Claude Code. So use that to your advantage, right? Think about not just incorporating AI into other businesses, but how you yourself can incorporate AI into your own agency to streamline certain processes. I, for one, streamline a lot of my content ideation and scripting using my own personal content engine automation workflow that I built out for myself. Now, the last video that I posted on this YouTube channel walks exactly through how I built that out for my own personal brand. If you're interested in building out that particular automation for yourself, then head over to that video and take a look at that. But in general, you want to build out systems like that so that you can streamline certain bottleneck processes in your business. And the number one thing that they recommend here is to use Claude Cowork to run a structured audit of your current operational load, document every recurring task and every decision that lands on your desk, and then figure out the best way to automate it. That is a great use case for Claude because you're able to use Claude to analyze bottlenecks in your process and identify what should be automated and what should be kept with a human in the loop. Content itself cannot be 100% automated because obviously I need to film it. Obviously I need to give my own personal human taste and judgment to identify which content ideas my automation does output are actually good for me to talk about. And there's a lot of other things that I can't automate, right? Obviously client relationships. It is my firm belief that you can never automate a strong relationship with a client. You need to take client meetings. You need to keep talking to your clients, understand exactly what their pain points are, build them out a customized roadmap, all that stuff to be a successful agency that actually delivers properly. So overall, identify which processes can be automated, which ones still require a human in the loop, and automate as much as you can so you don't need to worry about it. All right, that's how you're able to successfully launch a product, or in our cases, an agency service. All right, now we're at the fourth and final stage that Anthropic outlines here in the Founder's Playbook, the scale stage. And the highest leverage thing that I think that we can really take advantage of from this stage as an AI agency owner is these three sections over here. So the first one is turning domain expertise and institutional knowledge into AI context. This all ties back to the reframe that I talked about in the beginning of this summary, is that as an agency, the single biggest change you need to make is changing the asset from your hours to a codified system. And what I mean by that is whenever you create a workflow for a client, every SOP you develop along with them, every skill that you develop along that project, every markdown file, every Claude.md needs to act as a system that compounds. Now you'll see in a lot of my content where I advocate that beginner AI agency owners and AI consultancies should originally start broad in their market. Start by offering a wide range of AI solutions to a wide audience, iterate from there, identify what are the real pain points and bottlenecks within the business, and then narrow down your market size from that point. This is exactly what turning your domain expertise and institutional knowledge is good for, right? Because once you've worked with enough clients and you've identified exactly which systems are the highest leverage to target within your particular niche or within your particular solution, then it's time that you start compounding that domain expertise, accumulating skills, markdowns, and systems that you developed for that client, and then bringing them into your other client relationships so you can streamline the process for them. And this kind of ties into this section over here too, compounding accumulated user data into a defensible advantage. As your clients use the automations that you build out for them, you need to constantly be collecting data on how they use it, and then you can feed that into Claude to better inform your future services with your future clients, right? Over here, there's an exercise that Anthropic outlines where you can feed Claude a summary of your product's interaction data. So in your case, it would be your client's interaction with the automation that you're building out for them, and then ask it to identify the highest signal behavioral patterns in that data to design a feedback loop that turns each one into a systematic model improvement. Now, obviously, we're not developing a specific piece of software, right? We're building out an AI agency where we're delivering custom solutions for clients. So how this can look like for you is to analyze different client interactions that you have. When you hop on a meeting with a client, you can transcribe that meeting, feed that into Claude, and identify exactly which points that the client brought up that can be used to improve and iterate on the system in the future. So for example, if you're building out content engines for businesses, maybe Claude might identify a pattern where a lot of clients are wanting you to add a specific trending design style to the carousels that you generate for them. That can be information that you intake from Claude's analysis that you input into your processes to better improve them in the future for other design assets that you build out for clients in the future that you onboard. So ultimately, bottom line here is take into account feedback and also take into account accumulated domain expertise so you can better inform these systems and services that you provide for your clients as you acquire more in the future. And lastly, this is probably the most manipulative thing that Anthropic has brought up in the Founder's Playbook here in the scale section, but it's this idea of creating workflow lock-in. Essentially, you want to make the businesses that you're working with so dependent on the systems that you develop for them that they cannot possibly churn, right? And this can especially be used for AI agencies and AI consultancies because you're touching so many different parts of your process. If you come in as an AI agency and the first thing you do is audit a business's entire operations and identify which automations can best help solve those based on your domain expertise, then you're basically providing them an entire roadmap of upsells that you can offer them in the future, right? Obviously, when you're first starting this client relationship, you don't want to commit to developing all of those at the same time. You want to go in terms of a roadmap. But as you build your relationship with this business and automate more and more things within their operations, you're essentially locking them into working with you because no other agency knows their operations as much as you do. No other agency has a stronger relationship with them as you do, to the point where they basically have to respect your technical expertise and accept any upsells that you offer to them in the future. All right, so this process of workflow lock-in is something that you can really leverage with your AI agency if you're able to audit their business, identify a solidified, clear roadmap, and deliver on each point in that roadmap. So you basically become their personal integration partner. But yeah, that was essentially a walkthrough of the Founders Playbook that Anthropic has given us here and how it can apply to AI agencies looking to incorporate some of these. And to wrap everything up, I want to bring attention to this last line in the playbook over here, which says that the bottlenecks are no longer what you can build, but what you choose to build. For an AI agency owner, that's your future, right? It's all about identifying what are the highest leverage opportunities within a business that you can automate and how your agency can help them get there. If you take away anything from what I've talked about in this video, it should be that building is no longer where the value is. The value is by separating yourself as an agency that can identify exactly what is worth building, know which tools to orchestrate in order to get to the desired outcomes, and consult your clients on the best points of action to move forward, based off of accumulated experience, domain knowledge, and technical expertise. Anyways, if you want to learn how exactly I am doing this with my AI agency and setting myself apart from other AI agency owners in the space using my personal brand, then click the video link in the description below where I walk through exactly how I've been able to use my personal brand on Instagram to funnel consistent 5-figure inbound deals for my AI agency. And if you want to see how I'm practically implementing some of the stuff that I've talked about here in the Founders Playbook, I walk through a lot of this inside of my school community, more detailed and technical walkthroughs there. So I'll leave the link for that as well in the description below. But I hope to see you in the next video or in my school community, and I hope that was helpful. Cheers.